Welcome into another edition of Spits and Suds. So great to have you here, and wanted to talk because there have been so many changes, and we don't think like, okay, how does that affect the Texas Stars or the Idaho Steelheads and the Stars system in general? And we love to get updates on our prospects because we love talking about prospects. We love talking about Mavrik Bourque. We love talking about Stankoven and seeing what he's doing now. And, of course, there's Lian Bichsel, and there's more. So we have a great expert here on Spits and Suds who does an amazing job. I've tweeted about it several times at 100 Degree Hockey on Twitter. Gives you everything you want to know. A great follow for Texas Stars information. And the guy who runs that is Stephen Meserve. How are you, buddy?
Doing great, Gavin. It's been an interesting season down here in Austin, and certainly excited to see what the Stars have been able to bring to the Dallas Stars
Yeah,
with some of the talent that's come in.
absolutely. We also want to mention the book We Win Here, and we plug it with Sean Shapiro, but co-authored. Let's be honest, Stephen did all the work.
Something like
Yeah,
that.
something like that.
It was a great time.
Yeah,
Absolutely. And
absolutely.
if you want to learn more, absolutely go check it out, wewinhere.com.
Yeah, it's a terrific book. I love the stories between Texas and Dallas, and of course Curtis McKenzie, big part of that book too. And so some great stories. So Father's Day or an Easter gift, or if you want to give the hockey fan in your life, it's getting great reviews. So always like to get that plug in to support Stephen as well as our man Sean Shapiro. Okay. So yeah, Texas Stars banged up, a lot of movement. Stankoven comes up. Where would you like to start, Stephen? It's been kind of a crazy ride in Texas.
Well, I mean, we can start at the start of the new year. I mean, Texas was in pole position, first in the division. Everything seemed to be going their way, and we were joking that you better make no plans for May, maybe June. Like this team could go far, and then something switched. Injuries started piling up. Recalls to Dallas started happening, which hadn't happened all year so far to that point, and they started dropping games left and right. And at the same time, two of their division foes, the Milwaukee Admirals, who's Nashville's affiliate, and then Grand Rapids Griffins, Detroit's affiliate, started winning games, just piling them up. The Admirals actually set a record for themselves and came, close, I'd say, to setting the AHL record with 19 straight wins. And that obviously rocketed them to the top of the standings. And Texas is in a position where they're going to make the playoff because of the way that the rest of the division shakes out. They've got several teams that are below 500, and 5 out of the 7 teams in the division make it. But it's really just been a rapid turnaround in the last 2 months because of injuries and then youth and inexperience that have come in to replace those injuries. That's the way it goes in the AHL. And so this is a playoff team, yes, but the fates and the way that the team has looked is definitely different than it was 60 days ago.
You're so close to the team, and Sean and I got several Twitter questions when Stankoven was recalled. Several people said, I bet Mavrik Bourque's unhappy. And Sean and I responded, no, his time will come. But talking with Mavrik Bourque, what are his thoughts? And, noticing just from a statistical standpoint, it appears as though, the point brigade continues for Mavrik Bourque despite losing Logan Stankoven.
I think Mavrik Bourque, he's a player who, like you said, he knows, like his time is coming. He knows that his plan is to be in Dallas. If it's not this year, then it's definitely next year. You look at the way that he's, comported himself over his time in Texas. I'd say one of the things that you may not notice, unless you're looking really close, and this is something that's been the case all year, he wears an A on his chest. And he's a second year player. He's a second year pro. And he's wearing an A on a team that has a lot of experienced veteran players. And that speaks to how the team and the team leadership, the staff, and some of the other veterans view him. He's going to handle himself. He's going to handle his business. He's going to keep racking up points no matter who he's got next to him on his line. Obviously, it'd be great to have Stankoven and Bourque on the same line in Texas still, but Stankoven's racking up points at the American Airlines Center. And so, definitely no complaints about that from the Dallas organization. His time will come eventually. And I think when you look at the Texas organization, he's one of those guys that's got, a bullet next to his name in terms of he's sooner rather than later. He's got a good head on his shoulders. He's not gonna pout about it, to be sure.
When the Tanev trade came down, I was fascinated because I thought if Calgary or another team were going to pluck something, obviously they would ask for the big three, Stankoven, Bourque, and Bichsel, and Jim Nill would say that's not happening. But then maybe I thought the next person would be Blumel, but we didn't see that. Can you take us through and what your thoughts on the trade was as far as the player going to Calgary? A young defenseman, but not necessarily the standout that some thought he would be this year in the AHL.
It was, I mean, it was wizardry, right? I would say the disbelief in the press box, because it actually happened. The trade went down during a Texas Stars game. We started to hear rumblings. There was a late scratch. Artem Grushnikov was scratched just before the game started, and where they already had the game sheets printed, and they had crossed out his name and drawn a little arrow for one of the players who had skated in warmups to step into his place. So it all went down while we were right there. And to give you sort of an inside look at how the trade was interpreted by those in the press box, it's obviously trade season, and there are a lot of scouts in the press box. And one of them who I was sitting next to up in the press box, and I won't say who or what team, but he used slightly more colorful language. When he saw the trade, he said, "Frigging Dallas," just out loud to nobody in particular, because he just thought the trade, and then he went to go talk to the scout next to him about how incredibly it's just amazing the trade was in terms of the value that Dallas got for what they gave up. I would have thought, yeah, you would have had to put one of those three guys on the block. You would have had to package a couple of guys together. Blumel, like you said, who's an all-star at the AHL level this season, to get Artem Grushnikov, who was a second-round draft pick, but wasn't exactly lighting the world on fire in the AHL this season. That was a pretty masterful stroke by Jim Nill, and the team, is definitely going to be better for it, and we'll definitely see how the Texas defense adjusts to that. We've seen that over the past week. It's been a tough spot for them, but it makes the Dallas Stars better. And at the end of the day, that's what the organization cares about.
Yeah, it's interesting. Even the Calgary Herald is questioning this trade because, they were hearing in many NHL circles as many as 10 teams interested in acquiring Tanev. And many are saying that Calgary was being offered as much as a first-round pick, but turned that down because when Grushnikov came into the picture, that was kind of the seal of the deal, which is fascinating. You'd think maybe he was a throw-in, but no, in fact, he was kind of the person that put it over the top. So obviously Calgary sees something.
And the Texas Stars had a lot of great things to say about Grushnikov. And, one of the things that I tweeted out as it was happening and after the game is, he did stick around and say his goodbyes to the team after the game was over. And, there were a lot of high emotion moments there for him to leave and to stay there to watch the game and then immediately head out. The team thinks a lot of him as an individual. Neil Graham was quoted as saying he's a real first-class individual, and that he's very much, wants him to find a home in Calgary. And Neil Graham is actually from Calgary, and he offered, if he wants a home-cooked meal, just call him up, and he'll hook him up with a family member or somebody who can take him in and just, give him a little taste of home if he wants that while he's in Calgary. So I think the organization really thought highly of him. From my point of view, he's, more of a shutdown, defensive defenseman. Like I said, second round pick. So it wasn't like he was a complete throw in, but it definitely was a surprise. If I were to pick one of the rookie defensemen, maybe I might have picked Christian Kyrou or something like that. But I just, Grushnikov, I feel like maybe his future in Dallas was not what his future might be in Calgary. And that's good for the kid for sure. And if Dallas can get Chris Tanev for such a low price, then they're going to do that deal 10 out of 10 times.
All right, let's go through some of the players in Texas and give us update as far as their development. Let's start with Oscar Bach. Kind of an interesting, his third year in Texas, remaining pretty healthy overall. His points 25, 27, and 33. Mentioned in some circles as a potential future fourth liner for this Dallas Stars team. What have you seen?
Yeah, his specialty is definitely on the defensive forward side of things, right? His that's where he excels. He doesn't put the puck in the net with high frequency as some of the other forwards on the team. He's been on this team for several years at this point. He actually wears a letter now that Curtis McKenzie is out. So he's seen as a leader on the team. But I would put him more in that defensive forward sort of position. And he's been paired a ton with Freddie Karlstrom. And the two of them sort of form a pairing that moves around the lineup up and down. They've been paired with Matej Blumel. They've been paired with some of the other younger kids as well, because they work really well together in terms of being extremely defensively responsible. And if you look at the numbers, they have some of the highest plus minus on the team, which we can argue about whether that's a flawed stat or not, but in the AHL, it's one of the best we have in terms of defensive responsibility. And they are very defensively responsible. And that's kind of where they get used in the lineup for Texas. And I could see the both of them having that sort of impact in the NHL in like a bottom six type of role.
Sean and I were talking that with the defensive injuries that the Stars had earlier, that if Lian Bichsel was still in Texas rather than playing overseas, we might have seen him already. Do you believe that? And are we hearing any updates as far as Bichsel's return?
Yeah, I personally believe he would have made his NHL debut that week that they had just the spate of injuries all of a sudden happen. And talking to folks around the team, they kind of, sigh and say like, yeah, that would have been our option. That would have been what we did. And Bichsel made his choice and decided to head back. It was the player's choice to go back, and that was in his contract. Dallas obviously wanted him to stick around in the AHL. He didn't make that decision, and he went to Rögle in the SHL. I think he would have made his debut. He might have stuck around for a few games too and gotten that chance. As far as his return, so he is eligible to return as soon as his season is over in Sweden. And the Swedish leagues, most of the European leagues, end earlier than the American leagues, the AHL, NHL, ECHL. His last game is March 12th at 1:00 in Sweden. And he's not like he's going to jump right on a plane and come over, but we could be in a situation where he comes over within a few days after that, and he could be playing within a week here in Texas. And that's always been the plan for him to return. And that could be happening very quickly because his Rögle team is actually right in that golden spot between the playoff bubble and the relegation tournament. So if he makes it in that 9-10 spot, he won't have any more games to play and he can come over right away.
We have an interesting situation here in Dallas. Scott Wedgwood is an unrestricted free agent after this year and might get money on the open market that Dallas couldn't afford to bring him back, which opens up a spot. And Matt Murray obviously called up and had a shutout, and that was a great story earlier this year. But yet I see Remy Poirier getting some action, and I see Matt Murray getting some action. What's been your look as far as who you think's the goaltender that can take the next step? Because Poirier's mentioned it a lot as far as like the next guy coming through the system. And I don't know why, but I just kind of feel bad for Murray. I know, I just feel like, that undrafted status and fighting for everything he's got, it just, when he comes up, I think he actually looks, decent. I think he can play in this league.
It's one of those things where they've been doing, first of all, in Texas, a very much 1A, 1B. They just alternate starts. With both of them healthy, they just alternate starts. The issue is like the goaltending has actually been a bit of a challenge for them. Both of their save percentages are hovering around 0.90. Like it's not world beating by any means. It's kind of league replacement level. Goals against around 3. They both have good win numbers, but part of that is built on the early success of the team before the Christmas break. One of the things that you have to look at that you can't see when you just look at the stat lines is the age difference. Matt Murray went to college and was an undrafted free agent signing for Texas and for Dallas. Poirier was drafted and is several years younger than Murray. So you think about the runway that he has to get to that same spot. You've just got a little bit more of that development curve that you can build, right? So if you've got two players who are similar in terms of the stats that they have, and one is younger than the other, generally you go with the one who's younger because you have more opportunity to build and improve. The thought is, maybe this is what Matt Murray is, and he's solid and he can do like, third goalie kind of duty, but can you build him beyond what he is now? Does he have the time and the runway for that? That's one of those age-old challenges, right? You think about baseball. Like if you got two players who run to first base in the same amount of time, one does it with perfect form and one does it with, not perfect form. You take the one who does it with not perfect form, because when you teach him perfect form, he's going to be even faster. So it's that sort of mindset, I think, that puts Poirier over Murray. But realistically, neither one has distinguished themselves this year. And they've really needed some help in that regard, with the defense being as young and injured and inexperienced as it has been at times.
One of the other names when we talk about Stars prospects, we have the big three, and then you see the name Blumel. And tell us about him and, putting up good stats in the AHL, but what does he need to improve on to get that call up and be that next generation? So when you're talking about prospects, he's one of those guys like, yeah, he's coming.
This is one of those age-old challenges in the AHL where Blumel has played a lot of top 6 minutes in the AHL. And he's probably not going to get top 6 minutes in the NHL when he comes up. So it's continuing to be defensively responsible, continuing to build that side of his game so that when he comes up, he's not a defensive liability. He's a sort of player that you can trust to put in bottom 6 minutes and maybe only play, 8-10 minutes a night and make an impact. He's got, he's done really great stuff these past 2 seasons offensively. He's moved all over the lineup in Texas. He started the season with Bourque and Stankoven. Then he moved to the line with Beck and Karlstrom. With injuries and call-ups, he's been sort of all over the place, but he's continued to produce, which is great for him. But I think that defensive responsibility side, you're not going to call up a player who you can't trust to take, to take a defensive zone faceoff after an icing call, right? You don't want that player on the ice if you could instead get like an Oscar Beck, right, or a Freddie Karlstrom or something who might be more defensively responsible. So I think that's part of his game that he needs to build.
When we were watching Logan Stankoven in juniors, all of a sudden we're like, okay, maybe the Stars got a deal with his teammate Matthew Semenoff, and there were features on both. And Semenoff was drafted in the 6th round by the Stars. Tell us about his development. A little bit slower, only 11 points in 51 games. What are you seeing? Is it just a growth factor as far as like making the, because I tell people like the Logan Stankovens and the Wyatt Johnstons are not common as far as so quickly. A lot of times, heck, even Mavrik Bourque, when he first came into the AHL, there was some development. So is that basically what we're seeing in Semenoff?
I would say so. He's mostly been centering like the 4th line most of this year. And that obviously you don't get as many offensive touches. He's not on the power play, those sorts of things. And so those opportunities that he had in junior are not there as much. And it's similar actually to the conversation we just had about Blumel moving from the AHL to the NHL. You're playing a different role. And so Semenoff is playing a different role than he did in juniors now that he's in the AHL. And I think he's acquitted himself pretty well with that role. But again, it's, 4th line centering minutes as opposed to, top line power play, those sorts of things that he may have gotten in juniors. There's a couple players who are sort of in that bucket. And like Chase Wheatcroft is another one who is an undrafted free agent pickup. He's done pretty well this season. To elevate himself when he's been asked to in the top 6. He actually got the assignment to be on the line with Bourque and Stankoven, and I think it was his first shift with them. He scored a goal. So again, it's about when you have that opportunity to just grab it and snap it off and really show that you're ready to be in that position in the top six or on the top line or whatever. And Semenoff has not had as many of those opportunities, and that will come with time, right? Like you mentioned with Bourque.
Yep.
Even Bourque had a slow start.
Yeah, we were talking before we started this interview about a name that Stars fans, for good reason, are not familiar with, as far as Mark Rassel. And it's a wonderful story. A kid that was playing in the ECHL, fighting his way due to injuries, call-ups, etc. Texas needs a lot of help. He comes up. Stars end up sweeping in Manitoba against the Moose. And boy, I think Rassel can tell his grandchildren about the weekend that he had. It's just a wonderful story when you see players that are fighting and everything, and they get that opportunity. And, 3 goals in 6 games. We're not putting him on the high prospect list, obviously, but it's just a nice story that, hard work pays off.
It's one of those things that I think Dallas fans, I try to preach as much as I can. The AHL is such a hard level to win at because you have players who are leaving you through no fault of your own. Your best players usually are leaving you to go to the NHL when there are call-ups, when there are injuries, those sorts of things. And then you have to replace them with players from the ECHL. And you either have to have done your homework over the summer to get those players signed to AHL deals and assigned to Idaho, or you have to sign guys to PTOs, professional tryouts, in the middle of the season. You've got the entire league to look at. How do you figure out who the right guys are? And then those guys, once they get here, have to step up. And Rassel's one of those guys who he was playing, really well in Idaho, wasn't on a contract anywhere, signed a PTO with Texas, came in, scored in his first game. He scored 2, as you mentioned, in Manitoba there over this past weekend. Somebody from Idaho tweeted at us and here at 100 Degree Hockey was like, where'd he score the goals from? Was it within 5 feet of the net? Because that's his thing. That's where he goes.
That's great.
And so it's just a really cool story for him. And there's a lot of guys like that over the history of the Texas Stars who Dallas fans probably wouldn't know the name, 9 times out of 10, but they make huge differences in the development of the winning environment that Dallas prospects that they do know who have become Dallas players. It's important for them to have a winning environment, and having a system that extends to the ECHL that includes players like Rassel and Salati and all these other ones that you may have seen on the Texas sheets recently. Those players are important to making sure that Mavrik Bourque wins games and Matt Murray wins games. And that's something that sometimes gets forgotten.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's talk about Kyle McDonald for a second. 22 years old, fighting for position, one of those guys that, it's a very interesting story as well. What have you seen from him?
McDonald is a power play specialist so far in the AHL. Kid's big body, knows how to use it down in that bumper slot close to the net. One of the things that I've talked to the hockey ops folks about is McDonald does really well on the power play. They are looking for him to improve his 5-on-5 play. He's sort of played on that top 9. He's played third line minutes a lot of the season. He has still, though, gotten a spot on the power play because of the big body he has, because of his ability to finish in tight. But the 5-on-5 play is what he needs to continue to work on, and that's something that the hockey ops has recognized and I've talked to them about. They are working on that, but they're certainly not sad about the fact that I'm not sure right now if he is leading or is close to the top of power play goals for rookies, certainly, and power play points. So he is doing excellent things with the man advantage. He just needs to work on even strength.
Okay, so I want you to play, Steven, opposing GM with the trade deadline nearing. Who would you pluck from the system, or who would you like? Or at this point, are you searching after that first-round draft pick that Dallas has?
Well, given the fact that we know that Bourque, Stankoven, and Bichsel are untouchable.
Correct.
I think like if you can't get those, you might take your chances on someone else, being through the draft, because it's tough. But you look at this roster, and I've become somewhat jaded over the years. There are, 20 something names on the Texas Stars roster. Most of them are not going to become everyday NHLers. That's just how the math works on these things. And so if you don't see a guy who you're just absolutely falling in love with, like Calgary found with Grushnikov, then maybe you take your chances picking your own guy with a first round pick. I think that's what you're going to be asking for. Um, there are, however, some things that happen after the NHL trade deadline that affect the AHL. The AHL has its own trade deadline for players who are on AHL contracts. And there's also the concept of a reassignment within the AHL. And so that's something to watch out for after the trade deadline happens in the NHL. There's still movement that can happen at the AHL level. Like, for example, a player like Ray Sawada was a player who was at the end of his contract 10 years ago with the Dallas Stars. He needed a change of scenery. He wasn't going to be re-signed by Dallas, and so they assigned him somewhere else in the AHL. He was still a Dallas Stars player and on a Dallas Stars contract, but that sort of movement can happen for 1 week after the trade deadline. So the trade deadline in the AHL and the movement deadline is 1 week exactly to the minute after the NHL trade deadline.
That's fascinating stuff. Stephen Meserve, 100degreehockey.com and at 100 Degree Hockey for everything you want to know about the Texas Stars. You also mentioned just now that Gavin White, the defenseman, most likely to return this weekend for Texas.
Yeah, Gavin's been out. He got injured in the second game in Grand Rapids 2 weeks ago. That hurt on top of having Bayreuther out. Rosberg's been injured all season. Obviously, Bichsel's been gone. You look at the guys who've been on defense, it's a lot of rookies. It's a lot of guys from Idaho. And they've been really battling through it on defense these past couple of games. So it's good to see him coming back. He's been elevated in the lineup in a way that I don't think they expected at the beginning of the season, but he's been acquitting himself well with the opportunity, especially offensively. And that's what you're asking for of these players. You never know what's going to happen. You never know a guy who you thought was going to be your seventh guy turns out being in your top four pairings. If that happens, then it's on the player to surprise and delight. And that's exactly what White has been doing with the added minutes.
Yeah, I mean, if Bayreuther was happy, you can never have enough Gavins on your roster.
You got to have a lot of Gavins.
Got to have a lot of Gavins. But we have that at 105.3 The Fan, our afternoon host, Gavin Dawson. It's so funny when we're in the room, and that's why I'm called Spittle. He's called Dawson, because if you say Gavin, we both say yeah. So it's such a rare thing. So to have two Gavins in a hockey room would be fascinating.
Well, we'll see if you get a double Gavin pairing with the return of Bayreuther coming up here soon. Bayreuther, I know a lot of fans ask about his recovery. He had surgery on his ankle early in the season after that injury in the first game of the season. It wasn't healing, quite the right way, it seemed like, and he had another smaller procedure that kind of set everything right as rain. And so hoping, it could be really cool timing to have Bichsel and Bayreuther can't come back within a few games of each other, and that changes the complexion of the Dallas or the Texas defense entirely.
Yeah, plus if Joel Hanley clears and he's down, that
absolutely. I mean, all of a sudden you could be adding three high quality defensemen. You could be going from a really tough spot to a spot of strength very quickly, and that's the nature of the AHL, though.
Yeah, absolutely, and it does show the development that the Stars are seeing in Nils Lundqvist to hold him up and put Joel Hanley on waivers. Although I will say, if Hanley can clear as we're taping this, waivers have yet to come out. But with him, Bayreuther, Bichsel, I mean, that's some quality depth, because while, they might not play in your top four, like Gavin Bayreuther's a perfect example with a guy with quality NHL experience that can come up and fill a void if you need it.
Absolutely. And he knew that coming in, that he could be game one. The quote was like, game one or game 80, I'm ready. And he knew that he was just, one injury away from being the guy. He went away and played in Columbus while he was not in the Dallas organization. Did really well there. Played a lot of NHL hockey. And was ready to come back and be a veteran leader for these Texas Stars, or make an impact on the Dallas Stars as a player who could come in and do a really good job of filling those gaps when injuries arise.
All right, we got to get Steven's followers up on Twitter at 100 Degree Hockey, the website 100degreehockey.com, the other website wewinhere.com, co-authored by Steven and our own Sean Shapiro. Steven, thank you for coming on, giving us a nice Texas update, a nice prospect update. We appreciate it on Spits and Suds, man. Can't wait to have you on again, probably as the Calder Cup playoffs begin.
Absolutely. We should be talking about the Calder Cup here in just about 6 weeks, crazily enough. So hopefully we'll do a little bit of a preview and see who the Texas Stars are going to be facing off against.
Absolutely. Steven Meserve, 100degreehockey.com. He's an absolute beast, friends, and that's your update as far as the Texas Stars in the AHL. And I want to give you a big thank you once again. Don't want to mention it too much because we continue to grow, but we became Odyssey's #1 original hockey podcast for the month of February, and that's because of you, a 100% increase year over year. So it's guests like Steven, it's guests like Sean, Robert Tiffin, David Castillo, Craig Ludwig. We're building this together with the objective to grow this great game of hockey and DFW. So I want to say thank you, and all you have to do is tell your friends to subscribe, and if you're listening on a platform that allows you to give a rating, boy, we'd love those 5 stars. So thanks once again for Steven. I'm Gavin Spittle of 105.3 The Fan. Have a great day, everyone.